Okay, so in the hour that we have, we're going to be focusing on dignity at work. Please, I'll be monitoring the chat box, so if you've got any points of view, questions, please pop them in and I'll keep an eye on that. We're going to make this as interactive as possible, so there's a quiz for you to have a go at, there's polls for you to have a go at, all by way of sharing this very important subject. It's a bit of a toe in the water, we only have an hour, but having said that, I'm going to use this hour to the full and cram it full of as much of useful stuff as we can do in this hour. This is what we're going to be looking at. We are going to be looking at what constitutes negative workplace behaviours. We're going to be looking at this overused word banter. It's an excuse for a lot, isn't it? Where is it harmless fun? Where is it healthy humour? And where does it cross the line into bullying and harassment? We're going to be exploring that. We're then going to be looking at how we can challenge workplace bullying and harassment to promote dignity at work. What can we do about it? And how can we personally contribute to a culture where dignity at work is the norm, both as individuals and as representatives of our organisation? So let's first of all get you involved straight away, and let's have a look at this thorny subject of what counts as discrimination, harassment, bullying or banter. What is likely to land us in trouble, either legally or behaviourally, and what genuinely is harmless good humour. So in order to do this, I'm going to ask you to go to www.menti.com. The easiest way to do this is if you have a smartphone to hand, if you could grab that and pop www.menti.com in the browser on your phone. If you don't have a phone to hand, simply open another tab on whatever it is that you're using to watch this webinar this morning, and then you'll need to tab between this one and the one, so don't come out of this one. You'll need to tab between the two, ideally on your phone or on a browser on this, www.menti.com, and I'll be asking you to look at some situations and to decide whether, in your opinion, they are discrimination, harassment, bullying or banter. So if you could, once you get onto menti.com, you'll see a little box inviting you to put a number in. And if you could put the number in, which is at the top of the slide there, 85086138. So it's 85086138. If you don't have any devices to hand, or you're not keen on accessing things in this way, simply work through in your head. You'll know how you answered it, but I can see a number of you joining there, so I'll give you a little bit of time to get that underway. So 85086138. Okay, so you will see questions or multi-choice options coming up on your screen, and you use your phone. You use your phone to answer the questions, and then you'll see the numbers. You'll see the responses coming up on the screen. Whilst you'll see your responses, all of them are anonymous, so we won't know who's put what, by way of reassurance. So let's get underway. Is this situation discrimination, harassment, bullying, or banter? So, repeatedly likening a colleague to women on the TV programme My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. If you're watching from outside the UK and this show hasn't reached you, it's a show that kind of gives a dip into the gypsy and travelling community's lifestyle and way of living. So repeatedly likening a colleague to women on the TV programme My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. Let's see how you are all answering this one. Give it a bit longer to go. Don't worry about having a go. The whole purpose of joining this webinar is so we can all, enhance our knowledge. So please, feel comfortable to have a go. Okay. All right. So it looks like we have a mixture between discrimination, harassment, and bullying. Give it a minute or two longer. A few more going and joining on here at the moment. Okay, so what's interesting and encouraging is that nobody has seen it as harmless banter. So technically, if we're going to look at legalities, it could be discrimination. Being a member of the Gypsy or travelling community is recognised as an ethnic minority community under the Equality Act. Therefore, this could come under race discrimination. If the colleague is not a member of the Gypsy or travelling community, it makes no difference, because the law recognises discrimination and harassment by perception. So it still would count as discrimination. The repeatedly likening, the repetitive nature of these comments, if they are unwanted, would make it harassment. Those of you that have put bullying, I'm really encouraged by that, because the legalities matter when you need to sort of fight a legal case, but the nature of the behaviour is very much a bullying behaviour. It's belittling, it's demeaning. So whilst technically I've explained why legally it would come under the auspices of discrimination and harassment, it very much is bullying behaviour, and it's really encouraging that the majority of you have recognised it as that, so that if that happened in your workplace, it appears that you'd be likely to recognise that as not okay and hopefully call it out in some way. So I'm encouraged by all of those responses. Okay, let's move on to the next one. A hiring manager asks the candidate their age, and when the answer is 55, says, oh, look, it's not really, it's a young man's game, this one. Not sure you'll be able to cope with this workload, really, you know, it's a bit physical, a bit more for the young men, this one. So yeah, absolutely. I think you're all seemingly unanimous on this one. This one is more clear cut, isn't it? It's age discrimination, to treat somebody less favourably on grounds of their age is very much age discrimination. So I appreciate that's a more obvious question. However, in our industry, it is still common practice to kind of write people off when they get to the mid-50s, isn't it? Maybe we're not going to say anything as blatant as that in an interview, but there's kind of the underlying unconscious bias that people are past their best at that age. They're not going to be fit and active, and we often lose people, you know, in terms of people's dignity at work. It's not good when we're sort of like, you know, almost writing people off in our minds at that age. So whilst we recognise it's a very obvious question, underlying, you know, things still happen. Next one. Chris works in a team of 12 people, and Chris is the only one not included in the team WhatsApp group and is never invited to after work gatherings. Let's see how you define this one. Okay, it's always interesting to see how you go with the polls on this one. So if the reason that Chris is being excluded is down to one or more of the equality protected characteristics, so for example, if Chris is being excluded because of their age or their sexual orientation or their gender or their race, then it would be discrimination. If there is no apparent reason linked to a characteristic, a protected characteristic, then it would very definitely be bullying. If it is linked to a protected characteristic and it's repetitive in nature and people are deliberately ignoring, turning their back, that kind of thing, then it could be harassment. People who have experienced this kind of exclusion, because it is very much a bullying behaviour, so it's not linked to a discernible protected characteristic, then it is very much bullying. And people who have experienced this kind of thing have said to me that it's absolutely the worst thing, and they've said they almost wish the person would shout at them, swear at them, you know, be rude to them, something, because this being cold-shouldered and being completely ignored is like they say the absolutely the worst thing, this feeling of being invisible and being a nobody in a sense, or being made to feel a nobody. This idea of, I mean, people can be so petty, can't they? Coming in, giving everyone else a cup of coffee and not this one person. It's crazy, isn't it? But it happens. Okay, next one. Commenting, I can't be seen in public with a Man United fan. Now, I know we feel passionate one way or the other about this. Many of us do feel passionate about our teams or other teams. What would you say this one is? Okay, so this is, this is the nature of this, now it's not clear cut, because I would hope that it would be seen as banter, which is the majority view. And so we've got 46 thinking it's banter, but we do have some saying it's bullying and one saying it's discrimination. And the whole nature of the fact that this humour thing isn't clear is that, the rationale for those of you that think it's bullying or discrimination. So, but I'll be looking at the chat to see what, if you want to add some comments. So I would hope that this would be harmless banter. It depends on the intent or the, the things that surround it, the relationship between those people, or whether it was said really nastily or whether it accompanied any other behaviour. You would hope on the surface that this would be banter, wouldn't it? However, if I was to transfer that question to Scotland and ask you the Celtic Rangers question, then it has an altogether different connotation, doesn't it, with regard to religion and sectarianism, things like that, and it wouldn't be the same thing at all. So we do need to be careful. But I largely agree with the polls that you've put there. Okay, let's look at some of the definitions then to try and put a bit of clarity to this. Let's come back to the slides. So discrimination then, just to go forward on this. Discrimination is treating someone less favourably without justification due to one or more of the equality protected characteristics. So these are the things that we're protected from: discrimination, victimisation and harassment under the Equality Act. And just to remind you, these are the characteristics. There's 9 of them. Okay, so if the behaviour or the words are to do with one or more of those, and it's not justified, then it counts as discrimination. So even if the person's intent was not to discriminate, they could still be classed as discriminating and need to go with all the repercussions that brings. Good practice in terms of dignity at work wouldn't just limit employees' protection to those 9 protected characteristics. An inclusive employer would seek dignity at work for individuals regardless of their characteristics. Harassment, let's clarify harassment first, because this whole thing about what's bullying, what's harassment, and if somebody is on the receiving end of this horrible behaviour, they probably, then they're not going to go, let me pause and reflect, is this bullying or is this harassment? They're just going to think, this is horrible and I just want it to stop. There are similarities and there are differences. Harassment, it's unwanted, it offends, it humiliates. It's all about how the person on the receiving end feels, not the intent or lack of the person doing it. So if the person doing it says, look, I didn't mean it, I just thought I was having a laugh. But if it's repeated and it makes that person feel, offended, upset, regardless of how the person says, well, I didn't mean it, it still is harassment. I've mentioned perception and association earlier. Perception, somebody thinks you have a certain characteristic, so behaves to you accordingly. Association, you have association with a characteristic, like, for example, you care for a disabled relative. If you are harassed because of that, that would be harassment by association. Also, you don't have to be personally experiencing the harassment yourself. So you can be in an environment where it's going on even if it's not directed at you, you can find it very offensive and you can challenge that. Harassment is usually linked to the equality protected characteristics. Bullying is not normally linked to an equality protected characteristic. It's all about misuse of power. But, you know, some of the underlying behaviours like ignoring it, intimidating people, being offensive, the actual underlying behaviours are the same, but it leaves people feeling humiliated, vulnerable, that kind of thing. There's no legal definition of bullying, although we all in our hearts and in our heads know what it is and know what it means. And banter. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, it's the playful and friendly exchange of teasing remarks. And according to Collins Dictionary, it's teasing or joking talk that is amusing and friendly. So I think this playful and friendly and amusing and friendly tells us what we need to know around banter. It's perfectly possible to have a workplace where dignity and respect is practiced and where humour is part of that workplace. The workplace can be tough. We need humour to get us through a tough day. It's perfectly possible for it to be appropriate. I always think if it hurts somebody, and you know, the idea of banter is that everybody's genuinely relaxed and everybody's genuinely laughing. And if people are laughing through gritted teeth because they feel they have to, or because they're not laughing, or they're feeling hurt by it, even if they don't feel that they can speak up and challenge that, then it's not banter. It's one of the others. It's bullying, harassment, or discrimination. And like I say, just because the person says, look, I didn't mean it, that doesn't make it okay. So whilst there isn't a rigid line where you say, right, this side is banter, this side is bullying, there are some things that we can use to clarify it. And using definitions like these, reminding ourselves of definitions like these, is one way to determine whether it is genuine, harmless banter or whether it is discrimination or harassment or bullying. Of course, the other part of this is to create a culture where people can feel genuinely okay to speak up and to challenge remarks that they find offensive. And we'll come to that later on in the webinar. So the thing about this is we've looked in the poll just now at some fairly maybe more obvious ones, but it can be more subtle than that, and it very often is. So I'd like to share something with you now that looks at the subtlety of it. I'm just going to go into the chat very quickly though, because we've got some good comments on here. Andy Bell's mentioned policies do include victimisation. Your policies should include victimisation. So victimisation is, and it's simply time in the webinar that we haven't included absolutely everything, but victimisation, to clarify, is where somebody raises an issue of discrimination, either personally or on behalf of someone else, or stands up for a colleague, maybe offers to give evidence in a tribunal on their behalf and that kind of thing, and then they're treated less favourably as a result of that. They're cold-shouldered, they're ignored, they're overlooked for promotion and that kind of thing. That's victimisation, and it absolutely should be recognised and dealt with, and yes, it should be in all the policies. The idea about this, the subtlety about are things okay or not okay, Michelle, it is about how people on the receiving end feel and how people around them feel as well about the comment. What would you call it when a manager blanks you and treats you as if you're invisible? This idea of blocking people out is recognised as a form of bullying behaviour. It's recognised. Bullies know what they're doing. Bullies are they're good at their art, if you call it that way, and can just cold shouldering people and blanking them out is a well recognised, and if you want to say, it's a successful form of bullying, because it makes people feel absolutely awful. And you know, if someone shouts at you and swears at you and calls you something awful, you've got something to work with there. It's visible, and why are you talking about that? But if somebody just walks by and ignores you, other people might not notice, but you really do notice. Absolute bullying, without a shadow of a doubt. The idea about whether to challenge behaviour, you know, do you challenge up the line? if your line manager determines your outcome. I ask a question when we do longer webinars, would you speak out if someone did or said something that upset you? And people say yes or no or maybe. And then I say, what if that person was more senior than you? And then the poll goes down and it's less people challenged. Ethically, it's not right, but we do still have a long way to go in terms of that open culture where people can speak openly and honestly about stuff that's concerning them right up the line. There is no easy, quick answer, but I think the long-term answer to that is for organisations to embrace inclusive leadership and for their leaders to embrace inclusive leadership, because if you have truly inclusive leaderships, they do allow themselves that bit of vulnerability to show that they make mistakes, to be open to receiving feedback. It's not a quick fix, and cultures take a long while to change, especially, you know, some of our cultures in construction with very traditional, homogenous, you know, senior management teams, but I think that's the long-term solution. Okay, I wanted to share this with you because this idea about banter and you know, where it crosses the line and where it's a bit more insidious. Yeah, let me just share this with you, see what you think. It's a little clip, little film clip.
Morning.
Right.
You okay?
Fine, thanks. Understand congratulations are in order. You got that promotion? What happened? Flutter your eyelashes?
You know, jealousy really doesn't suit you.
Okay, so these little apparently throwaway remarks that I'm sure we've all seen, I'm sure some of us experienced. I think if we're being honest and we look back, some of us will have said versions of that, maybe not to be vindictive, you know, maybe just to do with the culture of the organization or the way things have always been done. And yet with these little apparent throwaway remarks, there are in that case obviously underlying sexist connotations, so it does become you know, a bit more subtle and is you know, it's one to think about, isn't it? It is one to think about, maybe in terms of these apparent quick throwaway remarks. Okay, in answer to the question about my name, which is she, her, it's the she, her in brackets, it's a recognition that people in the trans community face a lot of barriers in terms of people knowing which pronouns that they prefer. So if people put the pronouns that they prefer up front in emails and things like that, then it's clearer for everybody, but it also signals to people who are trans that it's welcome and people are keen to try and use the correct pronouns. So it's just a question in there. Okay. Okay. I don't understand why you feel it's a form of harassment. It's a message of solidarity to people in the trans community, and it's to make things clearer so that people aren't put in embarrassing positions and feel they have to explain their pronouns in meetings and things like that. Okay, yeah, joining a trade union or a workplace association can help with issues. Yeah. Good employers will engage with unions, and yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. Okay, let's get back into the session, and I'd like to go here because however we talk about it, we have an issue in construction. This was 2018 report, Pricewaterhouse, linked with Opportunity Now, 56% of respondents say they've been bullied at work. 59% of women in construction in those age bands have suffered bullying and harassment. Apprentices, the research found, are more vulnerable as they're less likely to report it to management. So, of course, you know, you come into an organisation, you're new, there's a dominant culture, quite a strong culture. You're not sure what's right or wrong. Of course, you're going to be less likely to report it. This idea about how, you know, some of us feel a little reticent about giving feedback up the line. If you're a new apprentice, how are you going to report it? So we do have an issue in construction, most definitely. And, you know, if you think that the male suicide rate in construction is actually 3 times higher than the national average, then we do clearly have an issue. So let's go and explore this idea of bullying and harassment in work. And we'll do it by going back to Menti. And I have a little quiz for you to have a go at. So if you could go back into Menti, you will see the code at the top there, 85086138. 85086138. So this is a quiz to try and clarify some of the points around how we treat bullying, harassment, discrimination, victimisation, and that kind of thing. So I'll give you a little minute to join, and then we'll get underway. Okay. All right, first question coming up. So as before, answers will be anonymous. You use your phone or your other device to answer, and you'll see people's answers coming up on here. So who holds responsibility for dignity and respect in your business? Okay. We'll give it a minute or two more. So I can see the validity in all those answers. So in terms of being the figurehead, the chief exec does have a role, and we've all seen in high profile cases where businesses have got it badly wrong and there has to be a sacrificial lamb. It's usually the chief exec that goes, isn't it? So in that sense, as the figurehead, then yes, I agree, the chief exec. We also, every single person in the organization has responsibility for dignity and respect, because dignity and respect relies on everybody, every single person in the organization practicing it and doing it. So it is every single one of us. But those of you that are in a supervisory or a management role, or if you're not, think about it in terms of your team and your colleagues, how do you think people in your organisation would have answered that last question? The vast majority of you thought that it was everyone, and it'll be interesting to see what you think, how people in your organisation would have answered that last question. So they think nobody, HR, yeah. Some of you think everybody would. Lots of people, lots of organisations, their people think it's an HR problem. The managers, yeah, oh, it's the managers, it's the offices, it's HR. Yeah, absolutely. Some of you think everybody, saying yeah, lots of you think HR. This is a really common thing, and this is why I answered the question. Champions, yeah. It's the champion's job to make it all happen for the rest of us. Leadership team, obviously leadership team and managers do carry a big responsibility for this, you know, as do champions. But it's interesting that you're right, it does need feeding from the top, though. You're absolutely right. Yeah, a lot of employers just think it's managers, it's not their responsibility to have anything to do with it. Directors, managers, and whilst I'm saying that they do have a big responsibility to role model behaviours, etc., etc., it's all of us. So yeah, that's interesting. It's not surprising, and I'm really unsurprised to see HR up there such a lot. Lots of employees don't think this is actually their direct responsibility. Yeah, good to see you've done a lot of training on it. Okay, yeah. So the reason I put this question in is exactly what you're seeing on the screen now, that a lot of people in a lot of workplaces don't think this has anything to do with them. Now that is a big issue, because you won't have a respect culture if everybody in that culture doesn't buy into it, doesn't role model the behaviours, and basically don't respect each other, don't treat each other with dignity, and are expecting HR to wave a magic wand and make it all happen, or their managers to wave a magic wand and make it all happen. Like a lot of the stuff, there's no easy quick fix to this answer, but I think one of the answers is that you get the message home at induction, and you embed the message continually by toolbox talks and things like that, meetings, you know, all the usual initiatives. But it is an issue that does need addressing, because if people don't fully know what's expected of them in terms of respect behaviours, can we expect them to do them? So this needs to be made clear to people at point of induction, that what you actually expect of the people in terms of their behaviour towards each other at work. It then needs to be reinforced by supervisors and managers. Yeah, HR are there to set the policy and deal with the tricky stuff, but they can't make respect happen. Okay, next one. Swearing at work is unlawful, true or false? What do you think? Got a 50-50 on this one. Okay. All right, so some of you on this webinar will breathe a huge sigh of relief when I tell you that it's not unlawful. Unprofessional, yes. Undesirable, yes. Unwanted, often, but actually not unlawful. I guess I need to put a slight coda on that. That's, for example, blasphemy, somebody taking the name of someone's God in vain, could come under religious harassment or discrimination. In that case, would be unlawful, but generally it's not unlawful. However, it is an issue. And also the underlying act that accompanied it could be unlawful. If I'm swearing at you while, you know, sort of pushing you up against a wall or something, you know, it could be criminal. But generally it's not unlawful. However, it is an issue, not just in workplaces in construction, but it is an issue. And I know a number of inclusive employers are now addressing this issue, because not everybody likes it. And the idea that, oh, especially on site, oh, it's how we are on site. It's different in the offices, but you know, this is what we do on site. It's not the case. Oh, well, it's different out here on site. It shouldn't be any different. An organisation has a set of values, and that's the same for everybody wherever they work in an organisation. It's unprofessional, so visitors, you know, don't want to hear it. It's not necessary for work, and it does make people feel uncomfortable. A couple of inclusive employers that I know in construction make this clear at point of induction. They say, okay, we don't swear and use that kind of language here. We have no racist words on this site. We have no sexist words on this site. That kind of stuff. We just don't do it here. And this is what we expect of you when you're at work. And it's not difficult, and people do get it. And people who work in those workplaces where it's become embedded actually say, you know what, it's comfortable, it's inclusive, everyone can just get on with the job, feel comfortable, no one's worried about stuff, no one's worried about whether they have to challenge stuff or not. So anyway, it's one to think about. But you know what, also, it does, you know, if we're having a really bad day and drop a cup of hot coffee on our foot or something like that, or shut our hand in the door, it does, it does allow us the odd kind of, you know, letting off steam. Okay, you can only claim harassment if you're the victim. What do you say about that? I'll just give it a minute or two longer. Right, so you can claim harassment if you are the victim, but it's not that you can only claim harassment if you're the victim. So if somebody says something in a workplace situation that is offensive or upsetting to you, for example, somebody is making a joke about people with learning disabilities. It's not directed at you, it's not about you, but you feel really hurt by it because a family member, maybe your brother or sister, has learning disabilities. You feel really hurt by it. You can claim harassment, and you don't even need, you know, a personal connection. You can say, actually, that's offensive. I don't want to hear that. That upsets me at work. So if this is the idea about, we have the right to work in an environment that isn't, it's a hostile, offensive environment is the words that use. So it isn't just the person. Okay, next one. Managers are powerless to prevent inappropriate behaviours when it goes on behind their back. So some of us work remotely now. Some of us can't be, we manage several locations. We can't be there all the time. We're allowed to have holidays. We can't be there 24/7. We can't see everything. I'll just give it a minute or two more. Just if there's anyone else wanting to answer on that one. Okay, all right, great. So overwhelmingly, you think the answer is false. And we would agree with you that despite the fact that we can't be everywhere all the time and we can't see everything all the time, the answer is false. So with that in mind, and given that the majority of you agree with that, how can, what can managers do about it then? How would you say, this is you can, free space to answer this one. How can managers be proactive in preventing inappropriate behaviour? What can they do? Yeah, education. So, education is so good because you're pointing out to people what you expect of them and what they can do before it happens. So it's not damage limitation, it's before. Open door policy, absolutely. Regular check-ins, absolutely. Leading by example, sure. Yeah, communication, reinforcing the message. Yeah, the message needs reinforcing. Educate, lead by example, absolutely. You do need to set a culture, which is why everybody has to be part of that culture. Everyone's behaviour is important. Culture, respect, lead by example. It is about, yeah, walking the talk, leading by example. It is also about, yeah, synergy between the teams as well. Teams operate in silos. One team might get it right, but cross team they don't. Empowerment, yeah. Letting people know it's okay to talk to you and to talk out about it. Politics and feedback. Be approachable, yeah. Checking, whistleblowing, yeah. Communication. All of these are great ideas. Calling people out, yeah, we need to be seen, because if we walk by and do nothing, we're seen as collaborating or not caring. Education, training, set expectations, communicating, yeah, absolutely. These are all things we could and should be doing. Yeah, all of these things. Yeah, this idea about making clear what's acceptable is a good one. Setting your expectations, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all of these things. All of these things are good ones. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah, 360-degree feedback, if done properly, can be illuminating. Think about, yeah, the language we use around others, even casually. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say all of these are absolutely sound ideas. We can save these mentees as a PDF and get them out to you afterwards to remind you of everyone's good ideas. To be something to take forward after the webinar. So we'll do that. Okay, great. Let's come out of that then. Okay, and thank you for taking part in that. Let's explore this a bit more. Have a quick look at the chat as well. Yeah, this idea about bullying and strong management, bullying versus firm, fair management. There is a difference, and this is about training managers into the difference. So it is perfectly possible to manage underperformance. It's perfectly possible to manage inappropriate or poor behaviour, and it's perfectly appropriate when you follow the procedures to use disciplinaries when they're needed. None of that has to be bullying. Bullying is behavioural, unnecessary. There is a difference, and the reason that some workplaces or some managers don't seem clear on the difference is a lack of training or awareness. Because yeah, bullies are good at isolating people. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, if you're a bully, you're not welcome in the company. Zero tolerance to bullying. Absolutely. Some good suggestions in the chat. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. So we've looked at some of the clarity on some of the legalities and what can happen. Let's now look at a few other points about this. So if we don't deal with discrimination and harassment at work, these are some of the legal consequences. We get taken to discrimination tribunals. There's something attached to discrimination tribunals called damages for injury to feelings, and it's unlimited and open-ended and unlimited compensation. It's not quite the invitation to an open checkbook that some might think it is. It's linked to loss of future earnings, long-term impact on health and well-being and ability to work and stuff like that. So there is a clear way of calculating it, but the organisation that allowed the harassment or discrimination to occur, and sometimes the individual that carried it out, can be liable for this unlimited compensation. Where an individual becomes liable is likely to happen where an employer can demonstrate tangibly that they have taken every reasonable step to eliminate discrimination and harassment from their workplace. So they do the training, they have the policies, they reinforce it at meetings, they put it in inductions, they call out behaviour, they challenge people appropriately, they deal with it through their procedures appropriately. If they've got all of that in place and the individual has chosen to act in a cavalier manner outside of all of those procedures, though, that's the kind of situation where the individual can be personally liable. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. You know, people that carry on with this harassing behaviour, either covering it up and pretending it's banter or thinking it's banter, are not aware of what a fine line they're treading, and how actually it's not just they're going to be ticked off by their supervisor. They could lose their job and actually, you know, end up in court if it went that far. Of course, a lot of these cases sadly don't go to court. People who are being harassed or discriminated against, more often than not, just leave, and because they can't face the battle, and find another job. So in addition to these legal consequences, there are business consequences in that we lose good talent. More people leave, and a bullying manager, people will leave a bullying manager and go elsewhere. So we lose good talent. And of course, you know, if it's proven discrimination, it's for most organisations that counts as gross misconduct, so people would expect to lose their jobs. For a business, we lose contracts. It's a part of contracts now that we demonstrate fairness, inclusion and respect. And of course, you know, if we're dealing with a lot of harassment cases, that's the exact opposite. So there are very real consequences. Let's look at a few guiding principles. So these are some of the messages that we need to make sure that everyone's clear on, that it is okay to say, please don't say that. Even if you're an apprentice that started last month and people are bullying you, it's absolutely okay to say, please don't say that. Don't suffer in silence. Humour at work is great. We need it to get by. But if it's unkind at someone's expense, that's not okay. We need to say so. We do not need to go along with unacceptable behaviour just to fit in. Again, if you're a newer, quieter member of a very established team where there's a very strong culture, you know, we talk about this macho culture in construction. We don't need to go along with that just to fit in. And as managers, we should be alert to new members of the team changing their behaviours in a negative way to fit in with a negative culture. We need to let people know that if they need to speak out, they should, and they will be supported and listened to. Clearly, if you're a manager or a supervisor, you need to be objective and gather the facts, but actually people need to be okay to speak out, whether that's about things that happen to them or whether it's on behalf of other people that feel they can't speak out. And people, you know, think, oh, you know, it's probably just me, I'm probably overreacting, I'm just making a fuss about nothing, I just need to, you know, get on with it. But if something's upsetting us, it's not stupid or trivial. It's also bad for health and safety and well-being, because if something's upsetting us, we're not focusing 100% on the job. We can't work as safely. We're not working as effectively. It's going to be stressing us, so we're going to be sick more. So for all sorts of reasons, we need to have policies, processes, actions in place and let people know about them. So if people are in any doubt as to what they're doing or saying is okay or not okay, think about, and these are useful questions, and you can put this out to your teams. Would you expect to see this in a respectful workplace? Does it align with who we are or who we want to be seen as a business? And a real simple one, which I've used before, and you know, how would you feel if what you're saying was said to your daughter, son, husband, wife, cousin, friend, whatever? How would you feel if that was said to someone that you care about? And it can make people think. The other part of this is it's all about telling people that it's okay to speak up, but actually, do people know how to do it? And what tends to happen is people will sometimes say nothing because they don't know how to do it or don't feel comfortable to do it, or it starts as around, fed up with this, can't stand it anymore, you're always saying this to me, I've had enough. You know, and it gets angry and nothing constructive happens. This on the screen now is a useful model that you can use, but you can also share with your teams, your people around you, to enable them to give feedback to people in a non-aggressive, useful way when they need to. How it works is this. Action. You acknowledge the situation factually. So instead of saying, oh, Lynn, you're always saying this to me and I've had enough, you say, calmly, you say, Lynn, yesterday in the meeting, you said this to me. It's a fact. I'm not going to do it. Then you throw in the empathy. Look, I appreciate you might have just been having a laugh. Then the impact on you. However, when you said it, I felt very uncomfortable in front of the rest of the team. So you're not saying, and you're always doing this and you're always doing that. You're simply saying the impact on you. So when you said it, I felt uncomfortable in front of the rest of the team. And then what's so often missing when we try and give people feedback, we don't tell them what we'd like to happen instead. We just say, you always do this and I hate it. But you don't give them a way of improving or changing or learning. So yesterday in the meeting, you said this to me, appreciate you might have been having a laugh, but actually when you said it, I felt very uncomfortable in the rest of the team. So next time, can I ask that you come and talk to me quietly at the end and don't shout it across the room? Next time, don't say it. Or can we agree a way forward? You know, all of these kind of things. It's a useful little model in itself, because we can't assume that everybody automatically is comfortable and knows how to give people feedback in this way. The other advantage of sharing a model like this is it almost gives people permission to do it, and it normalizes the whole idea. And people will get used to the fact that these kind of conversations will happen in the workplace when they need to, from time to time. They're low level, they're informal, they're amicable, they nip things in the bud. So whilst they don't solve everything all the time, and obviously a seasoned bully is not going to react to this at all, but for conversations where people haven't really thought through what they've said, they're unaware that they're offending, this can work very well indeed. And the simple act of sharing it gives that permission. Some of you said you need to empower people. Yes, you do. And then you also need to show them how they can give this feedback. So here's an example. Heard you use a people with mental health issues. You probably thought it was banter, but I felt it was I felt offended. And did you know John's got a sister who was very upset? She's got mental health issues. So even if it's just a joke, actually, I don't know if you knew, but it is still discrimination. So I wanted to mention it to you. Maybe you could just be a bit more careful next time. Is that all right? You know, I mean, inevitably when you roll these models out in a little training workshop, they sound a bit like a script, don't they? But you know, make it your own, use your own words around it. But this little model, it can be really helpful, and it doesn't hinder. Doesn't hinder at all. Okay, so some hints and tips then, to consolidate what we've said so far. We definitely need to role model respect behaviours, whoever we are at whatever level in the organisation. I agree with many of your comments that you've put in this webinar, that actually it does, to be completely effective, it does need to come from the top, and it does need to cascade down, hence the importance of inclusive leadership. All of us need to role model respect behaviours. People take the lead from their managers and their supervisors. New young recruits take the lead from more seasoned employees. So whoever we are, we need to role model respect behaviours, treating others how we feel they would like to be treated. Respect behaviours doesn't mean we have to agree with everything that everybody says, and often we won't, but it's respecting their right. And maybe it's just thinking before we speak, being a bit mindful, being a bit considerate, basically being nice. You know, it doesn't have to be difficult. We do need to challenge bullying and harassment, because it's often passed off as banter. People either misguidedly think it is banter when it isn't, or quite often they'll hide behind it and say, oh, I'm just having a joke, what's your problem? Making it out that you're the party pooper sort of thing, when in fact they're bullying you. So we do need to challenge that. If we don't have a management or supervisory position, if we don't feel comfortable challenging the bully, because the skill of a bully is they grind us down so that we feel we can't challenge them, then we need to run it by somebody else, speak to somebody else, but in some way, shape or form, whether it's direct with the individual, or whether it's through a line manager or another line manager or trusted colleague or employee assistance or HR, we do need to challenge it. Some of you mentioned whistleblowing as well. We really need to set the expectation early on in our businesses. We set the expectation at induction right at the beginning. People need to know exactly where they stand if they want to come and work for us. And that way we become an employer of choice, where people do want to work for us, and the culture is such that people want to stay with us. We need to reinforce those messages at meetings, toolbox talks and things like that. We do need a speak out policy. People need to feel safe to speak out. That model I shared with you is one part of it, but how do we cascade that information when people do speak out? How do we let them know it's okay? One little suggestion that may or may not work for you to get teams to buy into this is they agree their own behaviour charter. You don't even have to call it a behaviour charter, but you know, a simple team meeting, you say to them, okay, if you had a magic wand, what are the top 3 ways that you would like to be treated at work? And most people say, I want to be treated with respect, but they have to unpick that. Well, what does that mean? And they might say things like, well, I don't want to be shouted down in meetings. I think everyone talks over me because I'm younger. I don't like the swearing that goes on in the team, but I don't feel I can say anything about it. I think some of our jokes are a bit near the mark. You know, I know you think it's just a joke because I've got ginger hair, but actually it makes me feel uncomfortable. All of these things. What 3 behaviours, like, so listened, don't swear, whatever it is. And then when they all put their ones they want, you say, okay, as a team, let's agree a top 3 or a top 5 that we all think are important. And then they agree it themselves, and you say, okay, well, this will happen. It's simple as this will happen if we all agree to do these things. And it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Some people print them out and stick them on lockers or on, you know, walls and posters and things like that. But the fact that people have agreed it themselves and bought into it really, really helps. So that's, you know, there's all sorts of ideas around that you can do. And the idea that this idea of having an open, honest culture where it is okay to give and receive feedback, that needs work. But we've discussed some of the hints and tips in this and some of the other hints and tips earlier on in the session about creating this open culture, people challenging, people being okay to speak out, and setting your expectation at induction, and having a zero tolerance to bullying and harassment. These are all ways that you set an open culture. So I'll leave you with a quote. People may forget what you said, people may forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. It is so important that we think before we speak, that we're mindful of our impact, whether intended or unintended, on other people. So here's some help to continue when they need to have challenging conversations with their teams and with their staff. So that's really useful in that respect. The speaking out, a recording of the speaking out webinar, it has this model in the AID model that I've shared with you before, but it goes through very simple, the whys and hows about how you can make it okay for people, whoever they are, to speak out at work. So that's useful. And the FIR toolkit on the FIR website has a FIR induction video as well, and it has some guidance notes with it, so that even if you're not, you don't have to be a trainer or a learning and development specialist, you don't have to have a fancy PowerPoint or, you know, training room or anything, but literally you can do this induction talk. It's all there for you. And you can use that induction video at any time, not just induction as well, to reinforce the message. Also, I've put a link at the bottom. If you want more information on the legalities and the practicalities in the workplace of bullying and harassment, there's a link to good advice from ACAS there at the bottom of the page. So I'd like to thank you. I'm going to put a link in the feedback in a second. Let me just come to the chat in the last couple of minutes before I put the link in and cover a few off of those. Yeah. Yeah, somebody got made redundant for reporting bullying. It was rife. So that organisation had a toxic culture. I hope it went well for you afterwards. I hope that you know, got to a much better place and out of a toxic culture. Yeah, whistleblowing bill. Yeah, okay. So let me come out of the share in a second. I'm just going to drop a link into the chat for you. So you just find the link for you. Would be really grateful if you would just spend a couple of minutes once you come out of this doing some feedback for us. It does help. So I'll just put the link into the chat now. There we go. So the link's gone into the chat for some feedback. I'd like to thank you for participating in the webinar. I hope this has been useful. If you want to learn more, use the links to further learnings. We'll get the slides up for you, and we can get the Menti available as well. So thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your morning, and I wish you well with your culture of dignity and respect. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. Thank you. Bye.